Ça va.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're about to start, so if you could please head to the seating area and grab a seat, we really appreciate it. We're going to be live streaming shortly. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll get the signal. Okay, a very good morning to everybody in the room and people in Washington, and warm welcome to the audience that's watching us online. Importantly, very, very warm welcome to Executive Director Cindy McCain, who's joining us today from DRC, Kinshasa, DRC. Managing Director. We're also joined, of course, by Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, here with us at the IMF headquarters. Cindy, if I may call you that, MD, thank you so much for joining us for this really important event today, to share your experiences, but above all, the leadership you're providing to, respectively, the World Food Programme and the IMF in really fantastic ways. Thank you for joining us today for this event.
Thank you. Yes. Once again.
I am, without further ado, going to jump straight into to a few questions. Cindy, Kristalina, you've both been incredibly powerful advocates for gender equality and women's economic empowerment. In your book, Ambassador McCain, Stronger Courage, Hope, Humor in My Life with John McCain, you wrote, I want to be precise here, so I'm going to read if I may. You wrote that the strength of women and women's rights around the world are especially important because they affect children and families. And the cascade effect is remarkable. And Managing Director, you have pointed out...
You should say Kristalina to put us on equal footing.
Kristalina. Kristalina, you have pointed out that you had to work twice as hard as men to achieve your success. And in your role as the Managing Director of the IMF, you've been critical in pushing forward the IMF's gender mainstreaming strategy, noting that this is the loud and clear message we are sending from the IMF. Bring women forward for their sake, but also for the sake of everyone. These are things that resonate with everybody, men included, if I may add, men particularly, I should say. So, picking up on these themes, I want to ask you both to describe a little bit your personal journeys that have led you to these points. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll start with you, Kristalina.
Thank you, Abe, and I want to thank wholeheartedly Cindy for joining us. She is in DRC, a very intense program in a part of the world that needs the World Food Programme so much. So I appreciate you sparing the time for us. When I think of my journey and how it led me to be such a strong voice for women, for girls and women, there are these forks in the road that have defined who I am and why I'm here. And I want to highlight three. The first was when I was very young, in 8th grade back in Bulgaria. And I realized that I have an incredible hunger to read. And I would go to the library and read books in order until I got into philosophy. and read Spinoza and Kant. And then I would organize in our school during the long break a presentation of what I learned to my friends and would charge them a small amount of money. And I did a good job because it was very popular. But what impressed me at that time, I didn't know that it happened, was that the girls, my classmates, the girls, always had questions that were around values and care. And that later in life made me realize that women do bring something special. So that's one story I wanted to share with you. The second one is in 1990, as you know, the former Soviet bloc collapsed. And we finally got a chance to travel. So here I am in Bulgaria, getting a letter of invitation to go and be a visiting professor in the University of South Pacific in Fiji. I run to the map to see where is Fiji. Boy, it's very far away. But it took my conviction that now we are free and we have to embrace and exercise this freedom. I'm not going to bother you with how difficult it was in 1990 to get visas for Australia and Fiji and a ticket and get there. I would just tell you one small piece of the story. I'm arriving in Fiji, and at the airport in Suva, the woman checking our passports asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "Bulgaria." She types something on her computer, looks at me and says, "There is no such country." And of course, as you can imagine, it was a bit stressful. My point is that we have to stretch and never take a challenge as one we cannot overcome. And that, going to Fiji and teaching in a university there, was a huge source for me, and I didn't know it so much at that time, of that strength that I bring further to the job. But the most relevant story is how, until I was in my late 30s, I actually didn't consciously think about the need to work and fight for gender equality. I was in the camp of those who would say, "You're either good or not," until I recognized that throughout my life, I have been working harder just to be equal. And that at that point, I was already in a senior position at the World Bank, that as a senior woman, I actually have a responsibility to pay forward for what in my life I have received as a support, actually from both men and women. And that unless we struggle to overcome what is natural for women, to be more reserved, not to put themselves forward much, we are not going to see the contribution we can make to society to the fullest. And I want to finish with this. Our team here did a very interesting research. And the research tells us that if we only are able to increase female labor market participation by 6%, we will more than pay for the losses from the pandemic. If we just do that 6% increase of women in the labor force, all the pain that came from the pandemic is gone, plus. So my conclusion is the following, that we have decisions we make in our lives. And when we look back, it is really great if we can say, it was hard, but I did it. And be happy about presenting that it was hard, but I did it, as an example to others. to follow.
Thank you so much, Kristalina, for linking it also to the broader economic point. Cindy, if I may turn to you, and if you could please tell us about your journey in this vein.
Thank you very much for having me. I really didn't begin a journey. It kind of fell upon me. And so when I got married to my husband, prior to that, I'm sorry, I'm getting a terrible echo. I apologize. I can't.
Yes, the virtual reality is great, but not perfect. So we need to fix the echo that you're getting, and people are busy doing exactly that.
Can we? Okay.
Okay, I'll keep going and we'll see what happens here. So I
Working on this. Is it done?
Is it done?
be anything I wanted. And so when I got married to my husband, I chose to be a good wife and someone that stood by his side and followed him. But through that, I was able to observe a lot of things, including people coming up to me and shaking my hand and looking over my head to find my husband, having no interest in anything I had to say or do. And so I had a great vantage point to watch this throughout the years and watch the way women were treated, especially in political circles. In my humanitarian journey, I then was faced with the same, if not exactly the same things in countries that I was in, including Vietnam, and for this reason. I sat with some friends and we were in a cafe and I watched these women sweeping the streets, and it was blazing hot, and they were sweeping the new asphalt into place, if that makes sense. So it's not only hot, but it's asphalt. And I also looked up the side here and saw a dozen or more men who looked like the supervisors because they all had vests on, sitting and having coffee. And it was one of those moments that said, okay, something's not right here and we got to do something about this. It may sound very small, but it really had a huge effect on me, just that one moment in time. So as I progressed in my humanitarian journey, I found that women worldwide were mistreated. And women worldwide were discounted, and they were especially in the places I'm at now, which I'm in, as you know, DRC. They were discounted, mistreated, sexually harassed, sexually, mistreated as well, and faced with a country and people that did not believe them or care about them. And so it became more not about myself and what I was experiencing. It came because of the women that I met, the journeys that I listened to them about, and their reasons for needing help and their reasons for continuing to do what they do, not because it was for a better life, because in most cases it wasn't, but it was to take care of their children. Mm-hmm. And so those two things alone right there, it was a journey for me, but it was also an experience, and one that, as I went through war zones and went through cyclones that we went to, and went through the hundreds of different things, I saw what was a world that was very unbalanced and very cruel to the female gender. And I've made it a quest and a promise to these women that I met along the way that I would do everything I could to make sure that we were not only treated fairly and equally, but that we all had an equal shot at everything. It wasn't just about what town you were in or what rank you were at, but that every woman would have a shot at making sure that they could feed their families, educate their children, and live a better life. And that's really what inspires me and what keeps me going.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Very inspirational. Kristalina, as head of the IMF, maybe we can turn about what you're now doing in your current capacity to support this, support the cause of women. As head of the fund, can you say a little bit about all the work we've been doing in recent years to advance, including increased women labor force participation, but all the other work we're doing?
I'm very, very proud of the staff of the fund, because what I have seen since I arrived are people who genuinely want the world to be a better place for everyone, and have the fairness to recognize that there is discrimination, and discrimination holds societies back. Including gender discrimination. What I have seen since I came are two very interesting phenomena. The first one is the acceptance that when the data tell you a story, you have to follow the story. We are a very evidence-driven place. And what the data tells us is that gender inequality brings cost to communities and countries. And on the flip side, when girls are educated, when women can do what they want to do to be part of the labor force, if they want to be entrepreneurs, if they want to, that generates better opportunities, and that women more than men, but women more than men are likely to spend their money on their families, on their kids' education, on the health of everyone. And so when we have this evidence, it was actually very easy to translate it into a gender strategy for the fund. I want to recognize Rishi, get up. If anybody doesn't know you, they think they know you. And actually, can I please see the people working in the gender gurus of the fund? Can you please stand up? So here are some of those. And as you can see, remarkably, there is gender equality in this team. And what we have done in a very short period of time is to take to our board of directors a convincing case of the role of the fund on gender equality as an institution focused on macroeconomic financial stability, growth, and employment. So we stay in our lane, and what we do is highly appreciated by others because we are the best to do it. Since then, we have adopted a plan which is very well thought through plan, and we are engaging in countries actually exceeding almost twice the promise we have made because country teams are buying into it, and they're buying into it because of the evidence. Africa, you would see on the chairs a paper that was recently prepared, a book that was prepared on sub-Saharan Africa. And what I would say, and Cindy talked about it, my own engagement when I travel to sub-Saharan Africa is that women there are phenomenal. Women are better entrepreneurs than men, but they have 6 times less access to finance. So an institution like the fund can help elevate, amplify a problem, and then find a solution to it. And of course, there are terrible stories of needing to protect women against violence. But the second part is what we do internally, because we only are credible when we walk our own talk. And internally, again, it's phenomenal. Since 2020, we have gotten women in management positions, the percentage going from 28 to 39. We have now 3 out of the 5 at the top women, first time in our history. Antoinette is here, and of course, everybody knows Gita. It has not been easy to convey that we would do that strictly and only on merits. But I want to tell everybody in this audience, everybody who is watching, we would not accept men to be discriminated either, because we want all the talents of this place to be deployed. So when we promote, here is Dominique, a man that was promoted to be a director. Next to him, we have Brian, a man that was promoted to be a director in a job. They both were in jobs previously held by women. So we are increasing, but we are increasing recognizing fairness in how we treat our staff matters.
Thank you, Kristalina.
And I love you all, I should say that.
Cindy, if I could turn to you. You know, in your current role as executive director of the WFP, if you could say a little bit about what area you think policymakers need to focus on to help advance gender equality.
I think, first of all, policymakers and leaders need to recognize that women and girls are at a significant disadvantage in the world. Mm-hmm. And translated, what does this actually mean when policies are designed? We have to make sure that governments and organizations throughout, not just Africa, but around the world, are female inclusive, are gender equal when they enact these policies. We at WFP obviously focus on feeding and agriculture. And a little known fact that Kristalina just mentioned, sub-Saharan Africa, 70% of the food consumed in sub-Saharan Africa is produced by women, yet women don't participate mostly at all, quite frankly, in the actual agricultural, commercial agricultural aspect of it. Once again, it comes back down to education. It comes back down to access to food and the ability to feed your families and be able to create an income for your family so that you can survive and be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Cindy. If I could stay with you, MD, I want to change, make use of Cindy's presence in DRC to talk a little bit about Africa. And one of the big challenges, of course, in the region, and I understand yesterday you were a couple of days ago, you were in South Sudan also. One of the big challenges that both DRC and South Sudan, other countries face, is food insecurity as well as, physical security. If you could say a little bit about how WFP is helping tackle this, what concerns you, what are the gaps remaining? If you could say a little bit about that. And then, Kristalina, I'm going to turn to you and say a little bit about what we've been doing and including collaborating with the WFP. Cindy?
Well, in all of these regions, and I'll go back to South Sudan, which is where I was just a couple of days ago, peace is the answer to this. The conflict is what is stirring a lot of this, and also climate change. So what we do is try to give the opportunities. For instance, we feed children in schools. So what does that mean? First of all, the parents participate in this. They grow the food for the school, which is another economic boon to the actual community. But it keeps little girls in school. That's why we do it, so that we can enable them and empower them to become good female leaders as they grow up. It's that and many other things, really. It's about not just feeding people, but making sure that they have the ability to, as I said earlier, to feed themselves and feed their families, but also support their communities. If people are fed, they're not trying to sell their children into terrorism because they don't have food. I mean, it's very simple in that part of the world. But they also are migrating, and they're migrating not just because of conflict, they're migrating because of climate change. And they're migrating for many other reasons as well. But so the migration aspect comes into play, because what does that do? It puts women and girls once again at the bottom of the totem pole on this. Women and girls are always the people that are the treated most harshly and take the brunt of not only the climate action, but also the conflict. So it's up to us to act as not just world leaders, but world participants to really pay attention to what's going on in the world and try to stop things like conflict that that put people at such a disadvantage, including little girls and their mothers, and of course little boys too. We care very much about children, all children in this.
Thank you, Cindy. Kristalina.
Well, I want to first talk about the most heartbreaking experience I have had in my entire life. I was humanitarian commissioner, and in 2011, I just had my granddaughter, at that time a toddler. I was in Sofia holding this healthy, vibrant, smiley baby, well, kid. And then I flew to the countries affected by famine. And I walked into a center that the European Union was financing, by the way, with the World Food Program, to treat malnourished children. I walked in the room, there were 40 plus kids, and the room was dead silent, because these children not only could not play and laugh, they couldn't even cry. And this deafening silence of a room full of children, I would never forget. It tells me that we do have a huge responsibility to make sure that everybody on this planet has access to food, but especially children, because when they are malnourished as young, that affects their growth and intellectual development for life. So when I think of our role at the fund, of course I recognize that for conflict-affected countries, climate-affected countries, this issue of food security is truly life or death issue. And that we have to find in our work, our space to play our role. How we do it? We do it by helping countries to have policies in place that reduce the risk of a food crisis in the first place. But we are also there for members when they are hit by a crisis. As you know, we created the food shock window because there were a number of countries really in horrible conditions after the shocks that affected everyone. We have 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa that benefited from this window: Malawi, Burkina, South Sudan, and Guinea. And I am very proud to say that we have a pilot program with the World Food Program to work on 5 countries, among them Madagascar, if I remember correctly. Liberia, South Sudan, because what we want is to play our role. It is primarily on the policy front and on the emergency response front, but also expand our capacity to do it with partners. And in one of the food shock window, was it Malawi, where the World Food Program helped us to make sure food gets to those who really need it. I know that for many of us, the work in fragile states is somewhat new. We have in the past been less involved, but let's face it, we are living in a more shock-prone world. And it would be the most vulnerable countries and the most vulnerable people that are going to be hit the hardest. We have to play our role to build that buffers for these people.
Thank you, Kristalina. I want to leave a few minutes later for staff to ask questions, but before going there, I'm going to ask you to, I turn to you to see if you want to ask Cindy a question, a personal question.
I actually do. I admire you. I think you are a fantastic leader.
I admire you.
Thank you. What is the source of your inner strength? what is it that when you are in the toughest of times, you lean on and you kind of boost your courage?
Yeah, you know, as everyone knows, I was married to a very famous man, and I learned a lot of lessons from him, lessons that he told me that he had learned when he was in prison. And these were lessons of faith, they were lessons of courage, they were lessons of all kinds of things. And one in particular was about doing the right thing. And it's not always easy to do the right thing, but doing the right thing is obviously what you should do. And so one night he had been tortured quite heavily, and this is where this lesson comes from. He'd been tortured, and the guard came in and they wanted him to sign a paper that said that he had, you know, that he loved the Vietnamese and it was a great place and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, they had him tied up, and they came in with this paper and they said, "You can sign this. And when you do, nobody will ever know. Nobody will ever know." And he looked up and he said, "But I will know. I will know." And I think his lessons of courage and charity, he is the man that normalized relations with Vietnam. His lessons of dignity, those are the things that when I'm really down, and there's been some down days lately, I looked not only to that, but I remember the things that he told me about strength and remaining strong and remaining courageous in whatever you do. And I think that's the best way I can describe it. And I still every day think of something or something comes to me that perhaps he had relayed to me and told the story to, or whatever it may be. But I miss those things about him because I learn from him every day. And so I wish I had him around for that reason and many more.
Cindy, well, he's an incredible man, and I can see that you had the best of luck to meet each other. A big round of applause for you and for John McCain.
Cindy, I wonder if you have a question for the managing director that you want to pose.
I do. First of all, I want you to know I fangirl you all the time, even though we know each other, because I'm so grateful to have a strong woman like you in the position that you are in, because you come to it with a different sense of what's right and what we should be doing. And I'm so grateful for that. And I want you to know that. My question to you is, if you could, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Great question. I will answer. Before that, I just want to say one thing. My father, my late father, when I go to him and say, "Dad, what should I do?" he would always have the same answer: do the right thing. So very much like what your husband would say. And I do try to do the right thing. What advice I would give to my 20-year-old self? I would say to her, "Hey, girl, you're smart, you're strong, you're beautiful. Believe in yourself, and do not let people to jerk you around push back." I didn't push that much back before, and I tell all the younger women here, push back. If something is wrong, if you're not treated well, push back.
So what was the moment of reckoning that made you start pushing back?
It was, admittedly, I was fortunate. I come from a revolutionary family. My great-grandfather was a big revolutionary. So I kind of did fight my way through life, but I did not push back until I became a senior person at the World Bank. I would sit in a meeting, and people, men primarily, would be saying, "Yan, yan, yan," talking. And I listened to them, and I said, "This is nonsense," but I would not speak up until I became senior. And then I said, "Hey, it is now my responsibility." And I regret that. I regret this 20 years when I would listen to...
Not such wise counsel.
I will spare the word, but be quiet.
Thank you, Kristalina.
Use
Thank you,
your
Cindy.
voice. Use your voice.
Thank you, Kristalina. Thank you, Cindy. If I may, I want to give the audience a chance also to ask questions. So this is your opportunity for those in the room to come up and ask these two brilliant, distinguished women your questions you have on mind. Please. Do you want to say who you are and which?
Yes. Good morning. I'm Priyanka Chaturvedi from ICD. Thank you very much, for this wonderful opportunity. I have one question and one small anecdote. My son studies he's at the IMF Daycare Center, and he's had the chance to interact with Kristalina several times. And it's wonderful to see that every time he talks about a boss or hears us talk about a boss or a super boss, the default setting of a pronoun is she.
Brilliant.
And we have to correct him, saying no, men can also be, and it can be a he or a she, which is very different from the way my generation grew up. So thank you to both of you for being in these positions and giving us this inspiration. The question to, again, both of you, Cindy and Kristalina, is that when you're talking to heads of states on important issues, macroeconomic issues, solving food security, fragility, conflict, violence, big war problems, and they tend to keep gender, can we solve the gender equality issue later? And you have that little time talking to big head of state. What is your pitch? How do you try and, get them to put gender back on the table, or at least put it back on their radar immediately in that very little time that you have?
Yeah.
Thank you. Cindy, can I start with you?
Yes, I do a lot of that. And what I do in every meeting that I go into is gender is always part of the conversation. It's not going to be the last thing I talk about. It's overall part of what we are talking about in terms of feeding people and and helping communities and things like that. I just don't let them forget. I guess my kids call me a tenacious chihuahua sometime, and I think I am. Because I try to make sure that every meeting I go into, gender is part of the discussion, part of the conversation, and if the other events I go to, it's just part of who we are now, and we have to be cognizant of that. And so I don't want the world leaders to think they can get off light.
Oh, very much the same way. I use your research, so I always find a fact that can make the economy do better that has been overlooked, and I bring it to them. But you know what? Your son is right. The very best we do, both Cindy and me, is just being senior women in a position of authority. I'll tell you, when I was still new in a leadership position at that time at the World Bank, we go on mission, and we would be like 5 men and me, and I'm the senior. And the officials, the senior people from the country, would think I'm the interpreter. So I got into the habit of having one of the men walking in front of me, carrying my bag and saying, "This is our boss," because otherwise, it kind of to shortcut this moment. And this is why I'm so keen to motivate young women at the front to step forward. Because the best case for gender equality is by women doing their job really with their hearts and well.
Thank you, Kristalina. Please, you wanted to ask a question?
Thank you so much. My name is Furaha Joy Sakai Songweme. I am a Georgetown LLM student, as well as doing my externship here at the IMF. And it's been incredible so far. I just wanted to note that I take a course called Human Trafficking. And we had an opportunity to have a guest speaker called Evelyn Chumbo. And she had a glowing report about Senator John McCain and the work that he did and how he personally supported her. So I just wanted to thank you for your incredible work. and the role that you have played in human rights.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. First, I would like to address a question to Ms. McCain, and this is the question. Climate change presents an imminent threat to countries and well-being, not only to countries, but also to the citizens that inhabit them. Women often bear the brunt of the impact because they overrepresent the agricultural sector. How are gender considerations integrated into the humanitarian actions undertaken by the World Food Program? And if you can enlighten us with an example, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, primarily what we do, I mean, you are correct in saying that women are primarily the ones that produce the agricultural products from around the world. And they do so with many times at extreme danger or with extreme climate change issues. So what we at WFP do is that we make sure that we can find these people, give them the tools that they need, give them the opportunity to either grow the food or become an entrepreneur in a small way, and also be able to make sure that they can have cash-based transfers, which is something that helps people get started. What is that? First of all, when a refugee comes across the border to get help, they don't have anything with them, and they could farm. They want to farm. So we begin with a thing called cash-based transfers. What does this do? It gives them enough cash to begin to feed their families on a somewhat regular basis, and also maybe find a place to stay and maybe get started a little bit. So once women are farming a little bit, or if they're not farming and want to, we give them the tools, and many often the seeds. We work with other organizations that do that, like FAO and EFAD, and we all work together to try to give them the opportunity and support them in their ability to farm. But you are correct, women don't often have an opportunity, and it's the rarest of those that come to see us, but by the time they get to us, they've made a long journey. But women worldwide have to be treated as not just farmers, but they're the providers of their communities. They're the fabric of the communities. They're what keep the communities together. And it's women that we not only look to, but we want to make sure we educate, as I said before, make sure that they have the opportunities to continue what they're trying to do, either agriculturally or as a small businesswoman, and just give them the tools that they need worldwide for this. But the frustration for me is that all too often in these settings, as we said before, these women are sexually mistreated. And so I'm very proud to say that I'm the champion for 2024 for the prevention of sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment for the world right now. And I'm very proud to be able to do that because we need to protect not just our women in the field, but protect our women in our urban areas as well. And so this is another issue that I'm working on very, very definitely right now, and in everywhere I go.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
Thank you very much.
Kristalina, any last words for us? We're running out of time.
Well, we do run out of time. One message to all of us: make everything possible through policies to get money in the hands of women, because that gives them high standing, and it is also a chance to make improvements in the life of people faster. I'm going to abuse with small final story. When I was humanitarian commissioner, we had a program that did exactly that, put money in the hands of women. And I visited a village with the women and the men greeting me. The men on one side, the women on another. So I asked one of the men a question. How did you feel when we gave the money to the women? He said, well, initially I was very upset. But then I realized if you were to give the money to me, I would have bought a bicycle, and my family would have been, and myself, we would have been starving. So my last word, more power to the women.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Cindy.
Absolutely. Executive Director Cindy
Thank
McCain,
you.
Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. Thank you so much for this inspirational session with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Cindy.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye.